Welcome to episode 8 of Humans Are Whack. If you've been with us since the beginning, thank you for sticking around to witness the astonishing limits of human foolishness. But if you're new here, welcome to the internet's calmest chaos corner, where we explore the strangest, dumbest, and most unbelievable things humans have ever done. Before we start, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is in your country. We ask because it's crazy seeing people from every corner of the world, all sitting, laughing, and shaking their heads at how weird humanity can be. Now let's begin. On our first story for today is the story of a man who tried to take a selfie with a wild bear. It sounds ridiculous, something you'd expect from a cartoon or a meme, but it actually happened. And the worst part? It wasn't just a bad idea. It was fatal. The story takes us to India, in the state of Odisha, where a man named Prabhu Bhattara was on his way home from a wedding. The group he was traveling with stopped their car on a quiet forest road when they spotted something unusual, a wild bear near a small pond, appearing weak or injured. Now, most people would take that as a sign to stay inside the car, maybe take a picture from a safe distance, or better yet, keep driving. But not Prabhu. He saw the bear and thought, "This is my moment." He got out of the vehicle, ignoring the warnings of his friends. They shouted at him to stop, to leave the bear alone. But he walked closer, phone in hand, smiling like he was about to meet a celebrity. The bear shifted, breathing heavily, blood still glistening on its fur from an earlier wound. But Prabhu didn't stop. He crouched down beside it, ready to take the ultimate selfie, a picture no one else had. And then the bear lunged. It happened in seconds. The animal tackled him to the ground, and his friends screamed in horror from the car. No one dared to rush in, because this wasn't a bluff. It was pure, wild fury. To make things worse, a stray dog that had been following the group tried to defend Prabhu, barking, even biting at the bear, but it was useless. The bear overpowered them both before forest officials could arrive. By the time help came, it was too late. The video of the attack went viral across India, shared millions of times, ironically giving him the fame he risked everything for. But the comments told the real story. People shocked, saddened, and frustrated at how a single photo, one impulsive decision, could cost a life. Officials later issued a statement, warning tourists and locals alike not to approach wild animals, not to treat them as entertainment props, not to feed them or get too close. But the truth is, this wasn't an isolated case. Across the world, hundreds of people have died trying to take selfies with wild animals, on cliffs, near trains, on rooftops. Each one thought, "It'll be fine. Just one quick shot." And each one forgot that nature doesn't care about hashtags, followers, or Instagram likes. This story isn't just about one man and a bear. It's about a culture obsessed with capturing danger without respecting it. A generation that sometimes... On our second story for today is the story of the guy who tested his bulletproof vest by shooting himself. This one is as jaw-dropping as it sounds. A man in Texas, proud of his brand new bulletproof vest, decided he didn't need a lab, a dummy, or even common sense to prove its strength. No, he wanted proof in the most literal way possible. He stood in his backyard, handed his friend a gun, and said, "Shoot me. I'll be fine." Now, here's the thing. Bulletproof vests are resistant, not invincible. They're designed to reduce the impact of bullets, not erase physics altogether. But he didn't think about that. He just wanted to show off. The gun fired. The vest stopped the bullet. Barely, but the impact shattered his ribs and punctured his lung. The friend panicked and called for help, but by the time medics arrived, the damage was irreversible. The vest had done its job, but the man had pushed his luck beyond what it was ever meant to handle. When police investigated, they found out he had been showing off for social media, filming the stunt to post online. His phone was still recording when it happened. One officer later said, "It's tragic, but also a reminder that bravery without brains is just another kind of foolishness." And he's right. Because some people think testing limits makes them legends, when in reality, it just makes them headlines. So here's a thought. You don't have to prove you're bulletproof. Sometimes, walking away from stupidity is the most heroic thing you can do. On our third story for today is the story of the inventor who died in his own failed parachute suit. This one isn't just dumb. It's tragic, poetic, and eerily symbolic of human ambition gone horribly wrong. Let's travel back to 1912 in Paris, the age of invention, exploration, and wild dreams. The world was obsessed with flight. The Wright brothers had already changed history, and everyone wanted a piece of the sky. Enter Franz Reichelt, a tailor by profession, but an inventor by obsession. He wasn't content with making clothes that fit the human body. No, he wanted to design something that could defy gravity itself. Franz believed he could create a parachute suit, a wearable device that would allow people to leap safely from airplanes or high structures. The idea was noble. The execution, not so much. He spent years stitching and sewing his flying coat. It was made of heavy canvas and silk, weighing nearly 20 pounds. He tested it on mannequins, claiming it would open like a flower in the air and gently bring the wearer down. But here's the catch. The tests didn't go well. The mannequins crashed. The prototypes failed, and friends begged him not to risk his life. Still, Franz insisted that he had to prove it himself. He told reporters he would test the suit from the Eiffel Tower, the most iconic structure in Paris. So, on a cold February morning, a small crowd gathered below as Reichelt climbed the tower in his bulky invention. Cameras were rolling. The police tried to stop him. He smiled, waved, and said, "I'm going to prove it works." He stepped onto the ledge. The wind blew. The crowd held its breath. And then he jumped. For a brief second, the fabric fluttered, but it never opened. He plummeted 187 feet, hitting the ground in front of everyone. The cameras kept rolling. The crowd screamed. It was over in seconds. The newspapers the next day called him the Flying Tailor. Some mocked him. Others mourned him. But in a strange way, Franz became a symbol of the line between genius and madness, between courage and recklessness. Because here's the truth. Humans have always been dreamers. We build, we test, we fail, we try again. But sometimes, we forget that not every risk is worth taking. Not every experiment needs to prove a point. Franz Reichelt didn't die because he wanted fame. He died because he believed too much, because he couldn't let go of his need to be right. And in that way, his story isn't just dumb, it's hauntingly human. So the next time you think of testing your own invention, maybe test it without jumping off a landmark. On our fourth story for today is the story of the woman who fell into a hot spring while taking a photo. There's something both fascinating and terrifying about how far people will go for the perfect picture. For some, it's a quick selfie. For others, it becomes their last. This story takes us to Yellowstone National Park, one of the most stunning and dangerous natural wonders on Earth. Beneath its breathtaking beauty lies something ancient and merciless, boiling geothermal pools, capable of melting flesh within seconds. The park is filled with warning signs. Stay on the boardwalk. Do not enter the thermal areas. The ground is unstable. But for one woman, those signs were just background noise, obstacles between her and the perfect photo. She was visiting with a friend, admiring the surreal colors of a hot spring. You know those deep, iridescent pools, blues, oranges, yellows, steam curling up from the surface like something out of another world. She wanted to capture it, but not from a distance. Ignoring the barriers, she stepped off the designated path, camera in hand. Her friend warned her, "It's not safe." But she smiled and said, "Just one picture." She leaned forward, adjusting her angle. One more step, and the fragile ground beneath her collapsed. In an instant, she fell through the crust into scalding water over 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Her friend screamed for help, but it was too late. By the time park rangers arrived, There was nothing left to recover. The acidic water had done its work. And that's what makes Yellowstone so deceptively beautiful. It's a place where nature doesn't forgive curiosity. Authorities later found her phone, still intact, still holding the last image she ever took. A stunning, surreal shot of the spring. A picture that cost her everything. It's horrifying, yes, but also a perfect symbol of modern obsession, the need to capture life instead of living it. Because sometimes we're so desperate to show the world where we've been, we forget where we're standing. So next time you're chasing that perfect shot, maybe take one step back. It could be the smartest move you ever make. On our fifth story for today is the story of the man who used a chainsaw to open a beer can. Some stories make you laugh. Others make you wince. This one somehow manages to do both. Our tale takes place in a small town in Australia, a country famous for its wild animals, extreme weather, and, apparently, extreme stupidity. It was a lazy summer afternoon, the kind where the heat makes everyone a little too relaxed and the beer flows faster than common sense. A group of friends were hanging out in a backyard, drinking, joking, and daring each other to do ridiculous things. Enter our protagonist, a man with a can of beer that just wouldn't open. Maybe the tap broke. Maybe he was just impatient. Whatever the reason, he looked around for a solution, and his eyes landed on a chainsaw. Now, most people would see a roaring, teeth-lined blade and think, that's dangerous. But not this man. He saw a problem solver. He fired up the chainsaw, the loud mechanical scream cutting through the air, and his friends cheered him on. He held the beer can steady on a wooden post, grinning as someone shouted, "Do it for the video." He revved the saw, lined it up, and in a fraction of a second, the beer can exploded, along with his grip on reality. The blade sliced through the can, spraying beer everywhere, but it didn't stop there. It tore into his hand, nearly severing 2 fingers. His friends screamed and rushed to call for help. He was rushed to the hospital, bleeding and drunk, but somehow alive. When police questioned him later, he reportedly said, "It seemed like a good idea at the time." And that's the thing about human logic. It tends to evaporate after a few drinks. Because the combination of alcohol, ego, and power tools never ends in wisdom. The incident went viral online, earning him a lifetime nickname among his friends, Chainsaw Beer Guy, a man who literally risked his fingers and his life to open a can that probably cost less than $2. So next time something doesn't open, remember, there are easier tools for the job, and none of them require gasoline. On our sixth story for today is the story of the thief who tried to steal power lines and got electrocuted instantly. There's a saying that curiosity killed the cat, but greed? Greed has a way of electrifying stupidity to a whole new level. Our story takes place in South Africa, where cable theft is unfortunately a common problem. Copper wiring and electrical cables can fetch a decent price on the black market, but it's also one of the most dangerous crimes you can attempt. Still, that didn't stop one man from thinking he could outsmart the system, or, more accurately, outsmart electricity. Late one night, he decided to climb up a utility pole and cut through high-voltage power lines. To him, it was easy money. Grab the wires, sell the copper, disappear before anyone noticed. But there's a small, inconvenient detail he forgot to consider. Those lines were carrying 11,000 volts of pure, unforgiving current. Eyewitnesses said they saw a bright flash, like lightning in the middle of a clear night, and then silence. By the time authorities arrived, the man's body was still hanging from the pole. The tools melted right into his hands. Investigators later said he had been wearing rubber flip-flops for insulation. Flip-flops against 11,000 volts. The irony? He had even brought a friend with him, who, after witnessing what happened, immediately ran away and reported it to the police out of sheer shock. The power outage he caused ended up cutting electricity to half the neighborhood. And here's where it gets darker. This wasn't the first time something like this happened. All around the world, There have been cases of people risking their lives to steal copper wiring from train tracks, electrical grids, even streetlights. Some survive. Most don't. All for a few scraps of metal worth maybe $30. This story isn't just a cautionary tale. It is a brutal reminder that desperation and greed can short-circuit human judgment in an instant. Because when you gamble with electricity, there's no such thing as a second chance. And as one police officer later said, shaking his head, you can steal a lot of things in life, but not from Mother Nature's power grid. On our seventh story for today is the story of the man who tried to prove glass was unbreakable by running into it. This one's infamous, a mix of corporate pride, physics, and one fatal misunderstanding of how materials actually work. Our story begins in Toronto, Canada, in the late 1990s, inside a modern office building with a breathtaking skyline view. The building was home to a law firm, and among its partners was a man named Gary Hoy. He was well-respected, confident, and a bit of a showman. Now, Gary had a favorite party trick, something he'd done dozens of times before. Whenever new interns or guests toured the office, he'd take them up to the 24th floor, walk to one of the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, and declare, "These windows are unbreakable." To prove it, he'd run straight at the glass, full force, and bounce right off. The crowd would gasp, then laugh, then applaud. He'd done it so many times, people started to believe it was safe. Until one day it wasn't. It was July 1993. A group of new interns were being shown around the office. Gary, eager to impress, decided to perform his unbreakable window demonstration once more. He took a running start, slammed into the glass, and, true to form, the window didn't shatter. But here's the part everyone forgets. Unbreakable doesn't mean immovable. The entire glass pane popped out of its frame, carrying Gary with it. He fell 24 stories to his death. When rescue crews arrived, they confirmed the glass hadn't broken. It was still intact when they found it on the ground. The impact had simply dislodged it from the structure. News of his death spread fast, becoming one of the most infamous cases of misplaced confidence in modern history. Engineers later said, "The glass was indeed unbreakable, just not unfalloutable." It sounds almost absurd, and yet it's disturbingly human. Because there's something in us that loves to challenge limits, to show off control, to test fate, to prove we can handle danger. But sometimes, the line between bravery and foolishness is just a window frame away. Gary's story became legend, not because of the spectacle, but because of the lesson. Even the smartest people in the room can make the dumbest decisions when pride takes over. So the next time someone says, "Don't worry, I've done this before," maybe take a step back. Because history has proven, that's usually the last thing people say before something goes terribly wrong. On our eighth story for today is the story of the couple who died reenacting a movie stunt for social media. This one is a tragic collision between love, thrill-seeking, and the desperate hunger for online fame. A modern cautionary tale that shows just how far people will go for a few seconds of viral glory. Meet Pedro Ruiz III and Mona Lisa Perez, a young couple from Minnesota, USA. They were high school sweethearts, young parents, and aspiring YouTubers who wanted to make a name for themselves through daring stunts and lifestyle vlogs. Their dream? To become famous for being fearless. They filmed pranks, challenges, and outrageous experiments. The kind of stuff you'd scroll past on your feed and think, who on earth thought this was a good idea? But one idea stood out. Pedro believed he could pull off a real-life movie stunt that would blow up the internet. He told Mona Lisa he wanted to prove that a thick encyclopedia could stop a bullet. He even tested it once, on a different book, and it seemed to work. So he decided to go big. He asked Mona Lisa to film him for their channel while she fired a .50 caliber Desert Eagle handgun. one of the most powerful pistols in the world, at his chest. Pedro held a large hardcover book against his body, convinced it would absorb the impact. He told her, "Trust me, it's safe." She hesitated, but he insisted, and, with the camera rolling, she pulled the trigger. The bullet tore through the book and instantly killed Pedro. He was just 22 years old. Mona Lisa was 19, pregnant with their second child. Neighbors said they'd warned the couple not to do it. Friends said Pedro was obsessed with views, with fame, with being noticed. He thought this stunt would make them famous. He was right, but not in the way he imagined. The video went viral for all the wrong reasons. Mona Lisa was charged with manslaughter and sentenced to prison. Their story became one of the earliest and most haunting examples of how social media can turn dangerous when people blur the line between performance and reality. It's a heartbreaking reminder that not everything you see online is worth trying, and not every view is worth dying for. Because behind the clicks, likes, and comments, there are real lives, and sometimes one moment of poor judgment can end everything. So if you ever find yourself chasing viral fame, remember this story. Fame fades fast, but consequences last forever. On our ninth story for today is the story of the hunter who used his gun as a walking stick. Now, this one sounds almost like a dark comedy, except it's 100% real. It's a story about carelessness, overconfidence, and one painfully avoidable mistake that turned a routine hunting trip into a fatal disaster. Our story takes place in Arkansas, USA, where an experienced hunter, let's call him George, set out one chilly morning to hunt ducks near the riverbank. He'd been hunting for years. He knew the woods, the trails, and all the little tricks of the trade. But on that particular day, something as simple as laziness would cost him his life. You see, George had an old 12-gauge shotgun that he always carried loaded, just in case, he'd say. And as he trekked across uneven ground, he used it like a walking stick, jamming the barrel into the mud for balance while climbing a small embankment. Big mistake. The safety was off. His finger brushed the trigger, and before anyone could react, the gun fired, straight through his torso. He died instantly. When investigators arrived, they found the gun's muzzle packed with dirt from the ground, proof that it had been used like a cane. It was a textbook example of what not to do with a firearm. Other hunters in the area said they'd seen him do it before, resting the barrel on his boot, leaning on it while talking, treating it like a hiking stick instead of a weapon. They all thought, it's unsafe, but he knows what he's doing. But that's the thing about confidence. It makes you forget that nature and physics don't care how experienced you are. One wrong move, one tiny lapse in judgment, and the wilderness doesn't forgive. The tragedy sparked a wave of safety reminders in hunting communities. Never use a loaded firearm as support. Never assume the safety is enough. Never treat a weapon like anything but a weapon. George's death wasn't just a freak accident. It was the kind of story every hunter tells around the fire now, shaking their head, saying, "Man, he should have known better." And maybe that's what makes it so haunting, not the shock of it happening, but the fact that it could have been avoided so easily. It's another painful entry in our long list of human errors, a reminder that sometimes it's not the wilderness that's dangerous, it's us. On our 10th story for today is the story of the man who tried to launch fireworks from his helmet. Now this one is the very definition of humans are whack. It's the kind of story that makes you sit back and think, how did this even seem like a good idea to anyone? Our story takes us to Maine, USA, where a 22-year-old man named Devin Staples decided to throw an unforgettable 4th of July party with his friends. There was music, barbecue, drinks, and of course, fireworks. But as the night went on, and the crowd got rowdier, Devin came up with what he thought was a brilliant idea. He would put a mortar-style firework on top of his helmet and light it. Now, these weren't the small backyard fireworks you buy for a kid's birthday. No, these were professional-grade explosives, meant to launch hundreds of feet into the air before detonating in a massive burst. His friends laughed it off at first, thinking he was joking. But before anyone could stop him, Devin actually placed the firework tube on top of his head, lit the fuse, and stood there, posing for the camera. Seconds later, there was a blinding flash, a deafening boom, and silence. The explosion was instant and fatal. Authorities later said it was one of the most preventable accidents they'd ever seen. Devin's brother, who witnessed it, said he never thought he'd actually go through with it. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone, he said. He was just being foolish. He thought it would be funny. But here's the strange part. In the age of viral stunts and social media dares, this wasn't an isolated incident. Every year, people around the world injure or kill themselves trying to film something epic for attention, whether it's hanging off skyscrapers, juggling fire, or lighting explosives way too close. It's like the human brain momentarily shuts down logic for the sake of likes. Devin's tragic death became a sobering reminder of what happens when fun crosses into recklessness. The state of Maine even issued new fireworks safety campaigns using his story, a grim example of what they called a moment of stupidity that cost everything. So maybe this story isn't just about one man and one firework. It's about all of us, the part of us that craves excitement, that flirts with danger, that forgets how fragile life really is. Because the truth is, humans are whack. We'll risk everything for a laugh, a thrill, or a clip that goes viral. And sometimes, the result isn't fame. It's tragedy. Before we wrap up today's episode, let's take a moment to breathe. We've talked about people who've fallen into boiling hot springs, tested bulletproof vests on themselves, used chainsaws to open beer cans, and even launched fireworks from their helmets. Each one of these stories is tragic, but also telling. They remind us that sometimes, the line between bravery and foolishness is so thin, it's almost invisible. Welcome to Humans Are Whack, where reality is often stranger, scarier, and more unbelievable than fiction. Now, here's the thing. Every one of these stories is real. Real people, real consequences. And behind each one lies the same old truth. Humans are curious, daring, and sometimes downright reckless. But that's also what makes us human. So before we go, I've got a few questions for you. Which of these stories shocked you the most? Was it the man who ran into unbreakable glass? The thief who electrocuted himself stealing power lines? Or the guy who thought fireworks made a good hat? Tell us in the comments. Which one made you stop and say, yeah, humans are definitely whack? And while you're there, tell us where you're re-watching from and what time it is in your country right now. It's always incredible to see just how far this community reaches across the world, from early mornings in Africa to late nights in the U.S. to quiet hours in Asia. If you're new here, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your family and friends. Because next episode, we're diving even deeper into the world of unbelievable human behavior. From crimes that make no sense to inventions that should have never been tested, we'll continue to explore the wild, the reckless, and the utterly whack side of humanity. Because if there's one thing we've learned so far, humans never run out of new ways to surprise the universe. This is Humans Are Whack. See you in the next episode.